welcome to the PhantomFocus Roundtable. My name is Mike Rodriguez. I'm the host of the AudioNowcast, and I'm here with Carl Tatz, a studio designer, award-winning studio designer, and professional monitoring experts. And Carl, why don't you introduce our guests that we have with us today?
Okay. Start with Tom Snider. He's designed a PhantomFocus mixed room for him. How many years ago? How long has it been now, Tom?
About 5 years. About 7 years? It's been a while. Yeah. We upgraded it with the JBLs, but
yeah. So he started out on a pair of Dynaudio M1s, and then he just needed to boogie more, so we got him these massive JBL M2s that he found in his grandmother's attic, and we just dusted them off and brought them down. They sound pretty good. So he's got a very powerful system. He's got 4 subwoofers, and plus those speakers have a 15-inch driver in them. So, but Tom is a composer and does aptly named the newsroom because he does. What do you call that, Tom? The da-na-na-na, the stuff you do.
Well, it's all the music that will introduce the news show and bump it out to the commercials, close the news show. I mean, when they start a news show, the first thing you hear will be maybe 3 to 5 to 7 seconds of music, which is the open. Sometimes they'll have a little bit before, a little tease, something after that, and then they'll have segments on sports and weather. And stuff.
Fanfare. What?
The bumpers. The bumpers? You do the bumpers, the intros?
Popping in and out of commercials. So when you'll notice if you watch any cable, network, local, when you actually start to hear, you'll hear the music fade up, and they'll say, when we come back, we're going to talk about this and that and that and the other. So there's always music, almost always music that comes up underneath and then just kind of bumps it out to a commercial. So there's a lot of little things that you may not notice until you took it away, and then you'd be like.
And Tom, you were on the road with Amy Grant, as I recall.
I did a few of her Christmas tours. I did.
Yeah, that's where you came from. And Tom has tons of gear that you don't always see in a lot of studios because he's a composer. So the screen behind him, it's actually 4 40-inch TVs that ends up being about an 80-inch TV when it's done. I don't know what the hell he does, to tell you the truth.
Real estate.
Okay, and then we've got Steve Jankowski, a journeyman trumpet player who's played with everybody you can think of. He was the band leader for Blood, Sweat, and Tears. He's played with Chicago. He's was about 2 or 3 years now. You've been with Nile Rodgers.
Nile Rodgers and Chic, yep.
Yeah, and but not this year, or not lately.
Not this year. We got sent home March 12th.
And Steve's room was one of the more dramatic improvements that we did. And I remember in the middle of it, he had to go out and play backup Diana Ross in Manhattan and come back. Just a little gig like that. So he's played with just about everybody.
That's like the ultimate excuse. That'll get you out of anything. Like, no matter what's happening, all you have to say is, hold on, I got to go play with Diana Ross. Surgery, dentist, any
problem,
family
Steve.
Gathering.
Yeah, we'll keep the patient alive till you get back. Oh, cool. All right. So I think you wanted to ask me a question, Michael.
Yeah. So, before we start talking about PhantomFocus, Carl, why don't you just give us a rundown on what the PhantomFocus professional monitoring system is?
Right, for the uninitiated viewers, PhantomFocus system is basically, it's a monitor system. It's not exotic. It's just it's a monitor system. It can work with anybody's monitors or it can work with our monitors, which is the ideal, of course. And it's just the hardware involved, two subwoofers, two 12-inch, very powerful subwoofers go down to 20 hertz, PhantomFocus processor, PhantomFocus stands made by Sound Anchor, and then the PhantomFocus e-chair comes with every system, which is a perfect chair for monitoring because it keeps you upright. There's no slumping, that kind of thing. So it's when I discovered it, I said this belongs as part of this. So I just saw it as part of it. And it's a 2-day procedure. My assistant and I show up on site prior to quite a bit of consultation on the phone, making sure that the person's room is PhantomFocus ready. Obviously, if it's one of our rooms, then we skip that step because we already know what we're getting into. But if it's someone else's room, we just have to learn it quite a bit. So there's the difference between you two guys, between Tom and Steve, is that Steve had an existing room. So we spent quite a bit of time on the phone just kind of correcting some things that we needed to get ready. But, you know, lo and behold, I still miss the bicycles. When I first saw it, he sent me a picture of it, and it looked like a garage.
I won't pan left then.
The bikes are still there.
Yeah, okay, no panning. Anyway.
So it's truly a system. There's a lot that goes on. It's not just a pair of speakers. It's a whole system. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to get across.
It's the only way you can get the kind of results.
Sure.
You can't use somebody's auto-tuning thing because we're responsible for the whole thing. We show up and we laser it in, and, you know, whether something has to be moved this way or that way, you know, when we walk out of there, you see God. You know, they're both men of the cloth now.
So wait, you use lasers. So like you're like a Jedi Knight. You go in there. I just imagine you going in there with this giant lightsaber laser.
I don't go anywhere near lasers.
All right. Well, that's great. That's a great great description of what your system is. So let's just start talking. And Steve, do you remember the first time you heard the PhantomFocus system? Tell us about that.
I do. I think, Carl, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we met after I bought the chair. I think I saw the chair and bought that first. And then I think I told you we were on tour, and it might have been about a year later when we came through Nashville, and you took me to a room that you had a PhantomFocus system in.
Right, you were opening for Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Right.
Tickets. So it was a fantastic concert.
Right. So I came out, and I remember, I mean, I'm a skeptical guy. So when I read all the email blasts and everything, at first I was thinking, man, I got to hear this. It can't be everything he's saying it is. And he came and picked me up, and we went out to this studio, and as soon as I sat in the sweet spot, it was like Carl said, it's like all of a sudden, it's like hearing God. How it's just amazing. You feel like you're sitting in the middle of a soundstage in front of a band. You can hear placement of everything. You can hear EQ perfectly. You can hear, you know, low end, all the stuff that I was struggling with as a mix engineer prior to that. So we sat down. Carl played me select things that he knew, you know, worked and sounded great. Then whoever the gentleman was that we were at his place, he played me some of his mixes, and his mixes sounded good. And then I said, all right, well, let me throw something in that I mix, and let me hear what mine sounds like. And as soon as I threw it in, I could hear everything that was wrong with my mix. And that was the point that I knew I had to have this.
That's what a great story.
Yeah.
How about
Steve? So I remember that, and it took a while because you were so busy, you were traveling so much. But when we finally did it, did you have some doubts whether you would have that in your room?
I did because there was a lot of going back and forth. I mean, you know, I'm a trumpet player. I designed and I built this room in between touring. I was on tour with Blood, Sweat, and Tears at the time, and it took me a year and a half to design and build this place, pretty much by myself with the help of one other friend. But yeah, long story short, because of all the issues that we had, all the things that I had to change and redesign and do some more construction, I was still a little skeptical. But, you know, like Carl said, I went to that gig and I was checking in with him from, you know, from the sound check and, you know.
Play it for your wife first.
And he was still working on it. And I think I remember it was like midnight when he said, we got it.
Your wife heard it first, I remember that.
Hey, Steve, I'm not trying to cut you down here, brother, but just the thought of trumpet player designing studio, it just seems.
I hear you, man. I hear you. You know,
that's awesome. There's something so cool about that.
I can blame all that on my dad. He worked construction when he was a kid, so we built things when I was a kid. So I had no fear of tools. I had no fear of designing, and maybe I'm a little ignorant in that way, you know, but.
Hey man, you're a trumpet player, brother. That's like trumpet player. All right, Tom, how about you? Do you remember the first time you heard the PhantomFocus system?
Absolutely, can't really forget. An engineer friend who did some work over here was helping me with my studio then. I had, you know, very expensive focal monitors, sub setup, which sounded great. I wasn't worried about my monitors so much as I was just the acoustical treatment of them. And so I asked him about, you know, just what I could do or just some help. I didn't know where to start. And he said, well, I think you need to contact Carl Tatz. I said, okay. So I don't know if I sent an email or a phone call, and Carl calls me and says, well, why don't you come over to one of my studios? And I'm thinking, why am I going to one of the studios? I just need some audio treatment or something. I didn't really know quite what.
Panels up.
It's very suspicious. No, so I did. I went to the studio, and the engineer friend of mine knew that I mentioned him. You know, Carl called, and so I'm going over Saturday morning and listen to it. So. And Carl, of course, introduced me, takes me in, sits me down. And I mean, most people say that they can't believe what they hear, or that it's nothing like they've ever heard, or it's like hearing God. Is that in your literature, Carl? It's like hearing God? No.
In that direction after tonight.
But I was stunned. I had never heard anything like it. I'd been working in this business for a long time, and like I said, I had, you know, 20,000 or more invested in a really great monitoring system. And what struck me was that not only was it completely accurate, but it was also an audiophile experience. It was just luscious sound. It was just delicious. But not hyped, not inaccurate. And once again, and everybody will say, you know, it's three-dimensional. You can hear where every instrument is, but that is correct. So, you know, I just obviously then I needed to have it. But what I thought was funny was after I left, I got in my car, and as soon as I got in my car, I called my engineer friend, and I said, hey, you know, I just got out of Carl's place. He says, I figured you'd be calling me, but right about now. I was like, oh my God. So, yeah, it is, it's unlike anything you've heard. And I do have an A-list guitar player who has great ears, been in this town for 30 years. And he said, that's the best room I've heard in town. Now, he hadn't heard any of Carl's other rooms, but he's been in Massenberg's room. He's been all of them. He said that is unbelievable.
That's fantastic. What a great story. You know, one of the things when you jump up into, and Steve, you kind of alluded to this, when you jump into a really great monitoring system, is you start hearing not only the good things, but you start hearing the bad things. And it kind of alters your workflow a little bit. Like I've noticed one thing that happens when you can really monitor well is if you're working in Pro Tools. I mean, we've all seen people's templates where they have like every plugin, like every insert and send is like filled up with plugin upon plugin upon plugin. And a lot of times I feel like people do that because they can't really hear and they're trying to fix when they really can't hear, and it just gets, okay, we'll put this EQ on top of this EQ. I mean, I can understand multiple compression, but when you start doing effects on top of EQs on top of all that, and I think with like a PhantomFocus system where you could hear, you tend to not, you can hear all the bad stuff. You can hear that. I mean, let's talk a little bit about how having this high-end system now, how has it changed like your workflow and how has it changed what you do? And we'll start with you, Steve.
Well, that's absolutely true what you just said. Taking it on the mix side of things, I used to see 4 or 5 plugins, per channel. And it was mostly what you said, trying to fix things or make it sound the way I thought it should sound. Well, fast forward to having Carl's system, and when I'm tracking on input, the sounds are better now because the mic placement's better because I can hear better. So that on the way in is better. And now when I'm mixing, I mean, I do, I have this SSL system where I can input, all my external gear, all my analog gear through a direct input. So, I mean, I think at the most there might be 2 plugins on a channel now because I'm getting everything in sounding good, and the analog gear, it's just like, like you said, there's not a stack of plugins to try to correct things. It sounds good because on the way in, it's good. The other thing that I noticed, I never had subwoofers before. I'm noticing all this garbage below 40 hertz that used to be there that now I can filter out because I'm hearing it where I didn't hear it before. And also when I get mixes from other people, when I get tracks from other people that they tracked at their place and they want me to mix it or put horns on it or whatever, I can hear things that I never heard before. I can tell them, look, you gotta do something about your low end because there's information below 40 cycles that shouldn't be there. It's gonna mess up your mix. Or, you shouldn't double track the horns. I'm a horn player. You shouldn't double track the horns. Just single track them and place them this way. It's all stuff that I never heard so quickly before.
What do you mean? What's the difference between double tracking and playing in place? What do you mean?
Double tracking means you play, say you have a 4-piece horn section, you play each part 2 times,
right.
And there's one left and one right, so you have this kind of stereo barrage of horns. It's a real slick way they used to do it back in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
I
thought you were talking about something else, of course, yeah.
Talking about subwoofers, it's amazing once you start working with a subwoofer, especially a subwoofer that's calibrated correctly, how much garbage is on the low end that you don't even know about, And that's what's one of the great things about a system like the PhantomFocus system, because that just makes your mix muddy. Like even when it goes down to like a small iPhone, if you're like, why does this sound so bad? Because all that energy has it's all competing for energy, right? And so all that low end energy
that you're hearing the overtones, like at 30, if something's crappy way down there, you're going to hear the overtone of 60, 120, it comes up there. Yeah. The higher low frequency.
And things I never noticed before, people tapping their foot while they're playing, and that's really low end stuff coming through these mics that I never heard before that got on records that shouldn't have been there.
That's incredible. Hey, Tom, how about you? How has having such an amazing room now, sonically, how has that affected your workflow? What have you changed?
I wanted to start by picking up on what Steve and Carl were talking about with the low end. Because that might be the most significant thing. If I work, I'll mix here if I can, but sometimes different clients will want to mix like in their house studio or their in-house studio. So I'll mix there, but I don't really know what I'm getting down below about 40. And I remember one particular project, they had layered in, some real low end kick drum, like an 808, just to give it a little more low end. And I really couldn't sign off on the mix until I could get it back here. And then when I got back here, it was this massive boom that I could not hear. And this was a treated room. It was a good room, but it just, the low end was not there to hear it. So I can't trust a mix until I hear it in my room. Now, also I'm a composer. I'm not an engineer. So for me, it makes me a better writer. Because like I said, I mix things, I place things better, but when I choose what sound I'm going to use, when I choose what part's going to fit, I can hear where it goes. I can hear the frequency that is right and the frequency that's wrong, where things are masking each other or where there's a hole to place things. So I find that I'm writing better because I'm hearing better.
That's a great point, because when you hear your instruments and you can hear what they sound like, I bet it's even, I bet you get inspired, right? When you start looking for sounds.
Well, that was the other thing I was going to say, was that it cranks up the inspiration factor. So yeah.
For both of you guys, for anybody who has a PhantomFocus system, it's the inspiration, even for me, when I'm tuning one of these things, I was an engineer. I guess once an engineer, always an engineer. But for me, it's like, if it doesn't move me emotionally, I haven't gotten it yet. And, years ago, it took me a while to get there. Now I get there almost immediately. But that's it. It's an inspiration to walk into a room and know when you turn something on, and it never sounds like the speakers. It always sounds like the source, so it can sound something totally, it never sounds the same, just all of a sudden you've got some new tracks and new players or whatever. And it's like, oh, wow. I never heard that before,
Let me ask you guys this question. And we talked about the first time you heard the PhantomFocus system, but do you remember the first time you ever had like a goosebump moment when you're working on it? Maybe you're doing a mix and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it sounds like this. Do you guys have those moments, or is that every day?
Well, in a sense, yeah, it's every day, particularly if you're putting a track together and everything comes together and you're hearing it in all of its glory. And of course, anybody that comes over here, I always have to say, hey, you're going to have to hear this room. And they're the same way. Every time, systems drift. So it's good to have Carl come in every so often and retune it. And, he's already close, so it doesn't take quite as long, but some things may have gone out. And the other thing, Carl's always learning. So he's always kind of getting better at, it's art and it's science. So he'll come in, but, I did this the other day at someone's place, and and I figured out a new, trick with the phasing or something. So I'll have him come retune the room, which I need to get him over here soon. But, every 6 months or so, it's good to have these rooms retuned. Yeah. And that is always a goosebump moment, because Carl will get in here and he will work and he'll just take as long as he needs to get it until he's feeling it. And every time when I walk in, even though I've had this phenomenal room, just a little bit of that it shifted in those 6 months. When Carl dials it back in, you just want to sit there and listen to tracks all day, because it just
I paid Tom to do this, so you'll have me come on.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You know what? I'm slightly jealous. I'll be honest. I kind of hate both you guys right now.
You should be. You should be.
Hey, Steve, how about you? Do you remember like your first goosebump moment, or do you have those all the time? Or
To what Tom said, he's making me want to call Carl and get him back into retuning now.
Good work, Tom. I'm not paying you more than $20. That's it.
That's it. I got a ceiling.
But yeah, I've had goosebump moments for sure. I mean, for me, it's a little different than Tom. He's composed and he's doing a lot of stuff with samples and stuff. For me, it's live players. But recently, I had Christian McBride in, and he brought in Ray Brown's upright bass.
Unbelievable.
And I got the miking right on that. It was like all those records I listened to growing up.
Wow.
That's the sound.
Where did you mic it? Did he tell you where to mic it?
We tried it in a few different places, and he said, this is where I've had the best success. And when I put it there, it was like, wow.
Where?
Basically, all right, so say the F hole is here. It's about a foot up and facing down.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was a wow moment for sure.
When you listen on a high-end system, it's what takes your music from being just music to being like this emotional thing. It's like the more you hear, it's almost like the more emotion comes into your music. Like you just keep finding more and more stuff. I'll tell you one thing, and maybe you guys can expand on this. When you hear really good monitors, it really helps define reverb, because I think reverb it's still a lot of mystery to a lot of people. Like they don't know why they want to use the Abbey Road plate reverb. They just have this plug-in and they just do it here. But when you can actually start hearing the difference between not only the tone of the reverb, but the tails, like the tails on reverb, that's where the magic is. That's where and it's hard to hear on a lot of monitors, a lot of speakers. And then you get into this high-end stuff, and you get into this, Carl's, the PhantomFocus. That's the first thing that knocked me out when I heard it the very first time. It's like, oh my gosh, I can hear the reverb tails, because usually the tails are buried behind something else, but it has all that depth. What do you guys think? How is it with, like, when you start constructing with reverb in some of your effects?
I totally agreed. There was an Adele track, and I can't remember. It was, a few years ago. It was some ballad that she'd put out, and I don't remember the name of the track, but it was very open. And
hello?
It may have been. Is that real open at the front? I think. But like
for me over there.
Oh, I was playing it for you. Okay, right. It was one of those tracks where you knew that whatever was done with the reverb was something really special, and you wouldn't hear it unless you could hear. It was just this dimensional aspect to the reverb, and I guess it was probably 2 or 3 different things that an engineer put together. But yes, you hear that you're not going to hear on other systems.
Yeah, it's a similar thing for me. I track and mix a lot of jazz, and all of a sudden, once I got the PhantomFocus system, it just cleared up and opened up, and there was a lot less mud, because I was overusing reverb in the past.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's amazing is when you can hear reverb, like one of the things that separates like an amateur mix from a pro mix is the use of effects, right? The pro guys they know how to dial in. The amateur guys, and the way I talk about it, it's like you have your track, and if you treat the reverb as like joined with the track, it's almost as if it's presenting as to one sound. That's what most people do. But when you start hearing the reverb and you hear the sound, and then you hear the reverb, how it's kind of supposed to be, like kind of cradle it, kind of be wrapped around, not actually be infused, but kind of wrapped around it. That's the one thing that impressed me about the PhantomFocus, is you could hear that wrapping. You still have your main sound, right? But you hear that the nuance of the reverb wrapped around. And I think well, for instance, Steve, I know like when I mix horns, like, you got to get that relationship right between your reverb and your effect and the actual tone, because I've heard a lot of really great horns get ruined by overuse of reverb. And then if you don't have any type of effect on it, that's not a really great horn sound. It's too dry. I mean, why don't you talk a little bit about dialing that horn sound in with the Phantom Focus?
Well, I mean that's a great example. I have a friend. I've done 2 records for him. I did 1 record for him pre-Phantom Focus system, and that must have taken. Got to the mix stage. He's very particular about his reverb. He grew up. His dad was Barry Rogers. He grew up with Randy Brecker, Michael Brecker at his dinner table all the time. So he knows what he wants. He's very particular about what he wants. And it took off and on probably a good 6 months to make him happy. Now, I wasn't working on it every day. It was between touring and stuff, but it took him a long time to make him happy. This last record, it seemed like I was able to dial it in, and right away he said, wow, these roughs are better than, already than what we had last time. And that was due to Carl's system.
That's fantastic. Hey, Tom, let me ask you, when you, because you have the Phantom Focus system and you can work at such a high quality, how is it with your client? Do you notice that you give a client like a really great V1 right off the bat because of working at the Phantom Focus system? Are your demos like, have they been elevated since now you can hear all this stuff and really tweak your mixes?
Yeah, almost too much, because the people in charge, then they don't really want to hire an engineer. They're like, well, yours sounds about as good. I'm like, it's not any voodoo I'm doing, because I don't know, I've never been to engineering school. I've always been a composer and just learned it kind of on the side because I had to. But just the simple choices I make, whether it be reverb, or where to place things or where to filter things out, are resulting in mixes where, the powers that be that make the decisions say, we had one of the A-list engineers into mix last time. Your mix sounds pretty good. I don't know if we really want to spend the extra money on it.
That's, you know what? But you brought up a really great point. It's not only what you can hear and what presents as far as how you're going to add to your mix, but that's a great point. Like being able to hear what you need to subtract from your mix, right? When you get into your EQ and you need to tweak it. Like obviously the first thing, you can tell when you're working with people that aren't pros, or maybe, and this is how I started. I was always like trying to mold the sound by adding all kinds of EQ and stuff, right? And that's just what you do. But in reality, when you start hearing things, you start learning how to subtract as you should with your EQs and stuff. That to me, is where the talent really lies. And the fact that you have such an amazing monitoring system just puts you ahead of a lot of other guys. Not that you guys aren't talented.
Well, it just makes it easy.
Yeah. I mean, if you could hear,
both these guys used to get sand kicked in their face on the beach before they got a Phantom Focus system.
and now they kick sand. No, but it's so great when you can hear like frequencies on 2 instruments that are totally battling it out. You're like, okay, we gotta fix this. That's how you get some of the most amazing mixes. Aren't like, it's not all this additive stuff. It's just knowing how to subtract things and how to layer things.
What about have either one of you guys have a story of a client sitting in the sweet spot and reacting to a mix or something?
Sure. I have a client, a blues client, a guitar player, and he has a mix room at home. And in the past, before I got the Phantom Focus system, he would take tracks that we recorded here home and he would mix them here. As soon as we got the system and I put him in the chair, and like you said before, it wasn't even a V1, it was just tracking, what I was sending to their headphones. He said, wow, this sounds amazing. We got to mix it here.
Cool. Now, do you have other people use the studio, or are you the only one who actually mixes?
For a while, I was training a couple interns to work here while I was on the road. Then COVID happened, and so it's just me again.
Yeah.
Well, I have an even better story. I had my boss in here, and he sat in the chair, and his jaw just hit the floor after Carl had worked on the system, and you know, sometimes that results in a raise and things. So,
that's a great story.
Going up, right, Tom?
That's right.
No, but that's so true. You know, if you could get your client into your bay and just have them sit there and listen to it, it's gonna hook them. It's gonna be like a drug, because they're not gonna be able to hear it sound as good anyplace else other than another PhantomFocus room. You know, so that's one of the benefits of having a great monitoring system is you can get people hooked.
Well, you bring up a good point, because some people, you know, who aren't familiar with it, they think, well, sure, it sounds great there, but when I take it out someplace, you know, what difference does it make if it sounds great there? But it's designed so that the main purpose of it is so that the mixes travel. That's the whole idea.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a little bit. You have this great monitoring system, and you have this great mixer, and both you guys do. But it's like Carl is saying, it's not going to do you any good if you can't, you know, if the mixes don't travel. How good? Well, let me rephrase that. How well do these mixes travel? You know, what has been your experience? I'll start with you, Tom.
Yeah. So most people, when they come in, they go, "Oh, you don't have any oral tones, or you don't have, you know, whatever, you know, you don't have a TV speaker that you have to check your mixes through." And I'm like, you know, I used to. I used to have check my mixes, but I don't need to anymore, because I can play them on a phone, and play them on an iMac, a MacBook, or on another stereo. And nothing sounds off. Might not sound quite as fun as it does down here, but nothing sounds wrong.
Right.
Nothing sounds wrong. So they travel very well. And you know, not just, you know, I don't have too much back and forth with Steve as an engineer, but some of the engineers here in town who have Carl's system has said the same thing to me. They just like they know they can trust it, because you know, you don't have to run out to your car and throw it in and check your mix in the car or wherever you think you need to go, because they do translate extremely well to other systems.
Steve, how about you? Have you?
Yeah. Similar. I mean, I used to have oratones, and like Tom just said, I used to run out to the car and listen to everything in the car, and I don't feel the need to do that anymore. Everything translates, and similarly to what Tom said, you can listen to a mix on the phone, and it blows me away that I can hear everything on that little speaker.
That's fantastic, because that, you know, basically when you're trying to check it on all these different systems, essentially you're basically making the presumption that there's something wrong, and let's just see if we can find it. You're right. I mean, that's basically what you're doing, because I mean, it happens. I mean, it happens when I mix music, and you're like, especially low end, right? Especially low end. You go, and then you go to a car, and let's face it, cars are kind of tuned to kind of take advantage of the wrong frequencies. They're not the pretty frequencies. And so you get this buildup of bass, and you get this, and you're like, what is going on? You know? And so that's great that you don't even have to do that. I mean, I can't imagine how much worry that takes and is going to take off engineers out there, because they can just trust it.
Helps your workflow. It's 3 less things you have to do after you're done with your mix.
I get a question.
3 different systems.
You know, a lot of people, you know, what I observe, matter of fact, most people, they, you know, when they're ready to upgrade, you know, they decide that their solution is going to be new monitors. You know, I'm going to get these monitors, I'm going to get this brand, I'm going to get that, and then I'm going to be okay. Maybe I'll put up some panels, maybe I'll do a little acoustic work. But, when I get these new monitors, I'm not going to mention any names, but, these are so-and-so uses these, and I know they're going to be great. What would you tell them if they were going to spend $10,000 on a new pair of monitors versus keeping their NS10s and getting a PhantomFocus system?
You might get 10% out of new monitors. I used to eat up monitor reviews because we're probably all about sound.
Sure.
I mean, we're in music, we're engineers, we love sound.
Is going to save me.
Yes, exactly. And so I would, I tried many monitors, and I kept spending more money on monitors, tens of thousands, thinking the next monitor.
There's a lot of great monitors. Most of them are great.
Exactly. And they would give me a bump. It'd be like, oh, that does sound good. That sounds better. But it's orders of magnitude different from a PhantomFocus system, which is qualitatively a completely different experience. And I actually don't really care about, I don't even read monitor reviews anymore, because I've just concluded that there is really nothing out there that's going to sound any better than what I have.
That's fantastic.
And that was absolutely the jump to the PhantomFocus. So yeah, you save yourself a lot of money once you stop buying new monitors.
Steve, what would you say that's a great point. What would you tell somebody?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, Carl figured out the science behind all this. Every time, and like Carl said, I was a project because I built my room and Carl didn't design it from scratch. Every time Carl told me what to do to get ready for him to come up and install the PhantomFocus system, it sounded 5% better. We put the back wall, made that all absorbent material. Sounded 5% better. He told me to hang clouds, another 5% better. He's got it figured out. He's got the science of this whole thing figured out. So when he comes and installs his system, it's life changing.
Wow,
and it's not 5 or 10% when the sound when Carl can go in and make basically every frequency and every phase at every frequency perfect. It's not 5 or 10%. It's a qualitative leap. It's huge.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. Well, hey, guys, we're going to have to start wrapping this up now. This has been really fun. Before we go, I just got to ask one quick question. Now that we've talked about the PhantomFocus system and everything, I want you guys, if someone's on the fence whether or not they're going to go and invest in the PhantomFocus system, what would you tell them? We'll start with you, Steve. What would you tell them to bring them over to the right side?
For me, the first thing I try to do is get them to come over and sit in the chair and listen. And that does it right there. Now, if they're not anywhere nearby, or if we're on the road, I tell them, hey, if you're in Nashville, do what I did. Meet Carl, go to one of his rooms and hear it. I mean, your ears are going to be the best way to check this out.
That's great. How about you, Tom?
That is exactly what I was going to say. Just go listen to one. And Steve and I really aren't getting paid for this. We really aren't getting money under the table from Carl he's not giving us free gear. He should be, no. But it's just one of those things where the system sells itself. And you just have to hear it, because you really can't imagine what it is, you can't fathom what you're going to hear until you hear it, and you're like, oh, that's something that's totally, I've seen everybody who comes in the studio, and some of them are amazingly talented, experienced musicians and engineers. Some of them are just people off the street, and everybody just about falls out of the chair when they hear it. They just have this thing goes on in their eyes or their face where they're like, oh. I didn't know you were talking about that. You know, and I've used every superlative I can. You won't believe this. It's incredible. It is just gorgeous, three-dimensional. They're like, oh, okay, cool. And then they hear it, and then it's like, oh, and they look at me and they're like,
yeah, I go through that all the time. It's mysterious phantom focus. What the hell does that mean? And, you know, I tell people, I know if I try and describe it to them, I said, I'm just going to sound like a used car salesman. You know, when you sit in the chair, I won't have to say anything.
Yeah.
Well, hey, listen.
Thanks so much, guys.
I want to thank everybody.
Absolutely.
You guys are great. You have great setups. And if you have any questions or comments and you want to get in touch with Carl to do one of these demos, Carl, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
They can either go to phantomfocus.com or carltatzdesign.com. Phantomfocus.com is the e-commerce site where you can actually purchase the monitors, the Phantom Focus system, the subwoofers, amplifiers, the e-chair, all that stuff there. And then the Carl Tatz Design website shows all my studios, and I'm just waiting for this one guy to try finally finish this. We've got a new website that hopefully is going to go online sooner than later. It'll have bigger, your room will look even better, Tom.
Do it. Let me know.
All right. Well, from myself, Carl, Tom, and Steve, thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks so much, guys. Really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you. My pleasure.